back for our second week return
Yeah.
from our tour of India and the subcontinent. Um,
This
and I would
episode
just
brought
like
to you
to
by Kirin.
I would just like to point out for anybody who was watching this live, which I don't think anybody is yet, or anybody who watches it later on,
Mm.
no, we didn't coordinate before we came
No,
on air.
this is just pure happenstance.
This is just how we roll. He's wearing the
Yep.
merch available
We're in the
if
merch, ladies and gentlemen.
anybody had ever wanted to buy it.
Yes. Go on. You can. You could put in an order with us and we'll make it.
Of course, it's a big week in your world in work in retail. It is the unfortunately the curse of Black Friday has invaded our country, along with everything else, America. Any chance of getting an Xbox Series X or?
Hang on. I have one.
There you go. You gonna scalp that?
No, this one I'm keeping, but I'm gonna get rid of my Series S.
I'm gonna see if I ducked out the back of your store, would I happen to find a bunch of boxes with post-it notes on them, going, various names on them, and
don't know what you're talking about.
eBay.
I work for an unknown company that has nothing to do with any gaming at all. No. Don't look behind me.
I've heard about it happening in some of the big chains in the US, like store managers in places like Walmart and GameStop have been known for doing that sort of thing. Another company which has nothing to do with your employer there, GameStop.
No, not at all. Now, is my video still working for you? Because it's frozen on my end again.
I can still fine and dandy here.
Okay, cool. Good. All right. Because the recording was fine when I went back and looked at it last week. So we will just continue. And I would just have this weird, strange, pensive, mildly ashamed look on my face on my screen.
It's annoying. It happened to me last week. So I can sympathize. It's going to be a slightly, by the way, the Twitch feed, you look fine over here.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
So you're fine. So
I'm gonna just
don't you love listening in live, people, or listen to it later? You get all these technical things. It's like you should definitely.
This is the there we go. I'm just putting the. No, that doesn't help at all. I was just putting it down to lower frame quality, but nah.
Yeah, but anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, but no, but yeah. Let's get on with the show. Let's talk a little bit about what we've got. We've got another busy show lined up. We've got.
I think it's quite a bit. Last week was kind of nuts, but we've got a few things on the boil this week.
Yeah.
So this week, our chain movies, it was chosen by you, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1978 classic. And I have one heck of a movie to follow with on this one.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it.
I don't know if you had a chance to watch any of the new Netflix series Cowboy Bebop.
I've got 2 episodes in.
So I watched an episode, so we'll have a bit of a chat about that one. I checked out the new Apple TV Tom Hanks movie Finch.
That's
today.
right. Yes.
And I've taken out the second season of Morning Wars. And if we have time, I'd like to just touch base on the new Apple series. So there's 3 in a row Apple TV series. Dope Sick, starring Michael Keaton.
Okay, and I have 2 things that I am going to talk about very particularly. Last Night in Soho, the new Edgar Wright movie, and Amazon's next big fantasy TV series, The Wheel of Time.
Yes, I've been meaning to check that out. And an apology to our audience, I am seeing the event, The Eternals, this weekend, so we can have a wide-ranging, in-depth discussion about that next week. I'm very anxious to see it. It is my birthday this week, and I have promised to see it with somebody who is as big a Marvel fan as I am. So I will check out it on the weekend, and I'm very excited to see. I managed to stay largely spoiler-free somehow.
I don't know if it's a spoiler to say there's not much to spoil.
Ooh, meow.
Yes, salt. Yes. Absolutely.
Do you want to start with? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on Cowboy Bebop because
let's go.
One of the great divergences between you and me is your love for anime and my general indifference to it. But I'm aware of it. I know it exists. I'm not a weeb, but I tolerate them.
Now, my first question to you is: have you watched any of the anime version of Cowboy Bebop?
I've never seen any of a Cowboy Bebop TV show. It's a TV show, cartoon.
Anime, yeah.
So I know it exists.
I haven't either.
Okay, that's interesting.
I've
So I would have
watched
thought you might have had some
episode, and from what I'm gathering online is people who have very negative things to say about the show are generally people who are very, very big on the anime. Which, to be fair, that seems to be the standard fare for any adaptation of anything.
This is true. I mean, we go back to one of my pet topics, my love for World War Z, the book, and then the movie, or any book you've ever read that you've just gone and turned into a movie, and most of the time they get it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's rather interesting that both you and I have largely not had any particular like emotional investment in this. Like, it doesn't have any of the kind of the memories of, oh my god, I was watching this when I was younger, or anything like that. So let's just talk about it. What are your first thoughts on it?
Who are we're about to jump in and do it without telling people what it's about, but, which we never ever do on this show.
No, we are more professional than that.
The Cowboy Bebop is a Netflix series based on, as we've noted, the anime series from was it the 80s? I'm not sure. It's a while ago. A ragtag crew of bounty hunters chases down the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. They'll save the world for the right price. Probably the biggest star in the show that you will recognize straight away is John Cho as Spike Spiegel. The rest of the cast, I don't think I've ever heard of any of them.
Now, I think, if memory serves, I think the guy who plays Jet Black, one Mustafa Shakir, I think he was in one of the seasons of
he was in
Luke Cage.
Luke Cage.
Yeah. He played Bushman, Bushmaster or whatever it was. Yeah. But beyond that, it's no, me neither. Really,
Tamara Tooney used to be in Law and Order. She's in 6 episodes.
That's right.
But John Cho, of course, you'll remember best for Harold and Kumar. And
the new Star Trek movies.
The Star Trek movies, the Abrams verse Star Trek movies, where he played Sulu. I guess it's progress to see an actual Asian American playing a role written for an Asian person. Scarlett Johansson in Ghost in the Shell, which of course proved a little controversial.
Yeah.
I didn't like this. I watched the trailer. And I thought the trailer looked good. I thought the trailer looked interesting. It looked like it had a fairly light-hearted, action-packed, highly stylized, sort of almost kind of reminded me a little bit of a Serenity or Firefly, a tiny little bit.
That's what I was getting from it too, yeah. And
I guess it's kind of there, but it's just done really, really badly. And I've actually been surprised at how many people are saying they love this. Especially episode 1 has a 7.1 on IMDb as an episode. The overall series has a rating of 6.7. I found it weak and weird. Parts of it look really fucking cheap. Like, really cheap. It's an opening scene is a heist of a casino going on, which is interrupted by, this is the first 5 minutes, so no spoilers here. By Spike interrupts it with along with Jet as they are trying to capture the gang who are robbing the casino to hand them in for a bounty. And that scene looks kind of cheap. It really, really looks like it's shot on a set. Like, it doesn't feel... it's a space casino, and in fairness, it's been a little while since I've been to a space casino. The whole COVID thing's kind of knocked it on their head.
True. It has been suffering.
And my insufferable gambling addiction. But less said about that, the better. It just felt cheap, and it was on a set. Like I said, it really felt fake. But then the next scene was them traveling across the galaxy to hand in their bounty, and that looked really, really. We're going for like a wormhole or a space gate thing, or and you're like, that looked cool. Looked really cool. The space stuff looks cool, but the sets, they really look like a really cheaply made first scene. The other part of it, which has really started to bother me in the first episode, was the lack of impact of anything happening in terms of action. So there's a lot of kung fu type stuff in it. A lot of fight scenes, a lot of gunfights. Having seen Shang-Chi a couple of weeks ago, and put my hand up again, I am not an expert when it comes to kung fu movies or karate movies.
You gave up that crown a while ago.
When I was born. I don't like them. But I enjoyed the fight scenes in Shang-Chi. They felt like they had impact when they were hitting someone. You could buy the fact that he was actually trying to hurt them and actually hitting them. Whereas there's something about the fight scenes in this that felt like they were in slow motion. And they were like pulling their punches very, very obviously. And I just didn't feel... It really pulled me out of the whole show because it was so fake.
That's been one of my biggest problems with it. And I think I know why it has been chosen to do that way, because I've watched, I think, maybe 2 episodes now of the anime as well. And
is this just recently?
Yeah. This I'm kind of watching live action anime in tandem. And the fight sequences in the anime are very stylized, very cool. And they have that kind of comic booky kind of feel where you see Spike will be swinging around for a punch or a kick, and then there's just that freeze frame moment that, thinking about it right now, they got really well. They kind of perfected it in Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where it had that comic book feel, and then there was that almost like a 2 millisecond pause of the impact, and then it carried on. Whereas in the live action of Cowboy Bebop, it feels more like, all right, and the set goes up to here, pause, move on. It feels very staged to look good, but it feels like they need to speed up the action sequences by about 50% to be able to actually sell them. They just look too much like a ballet,
and not in a good way, because that was one of our things. I liked about Shang-Chi, to go back to that, was some of the fight scenes, especially the one between Shang-Chi's mother and father when they meet each other in the woods. It was very choreographed, and it was very obviously meant to look like ballet or dancing. Or if you look at something like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the fight scenes in that are so gorgeously choreographed, they could be regarded as a dance in many ways, which is part of a genius of Ang Lee's film. But this one, it looks like maybe it's like shitty dancing at that blue light disco between 2 kids who don't
look. I've apologized about that situation multiple times.
Hey, we all hit the floor when 100% Pure Love by Crystal Waters comes on. That's just that's the rule. I don't make the rules. I just live by
actually, no, you don't make the rules all the time. It's only 76% of the time that you make the rules.
Only 76. 5 out of 7 times, but when it comes to Crystal Waters, I am a slave to that rhythm. But it just felt really weird. I was watching it going, this is so odd. I can't quite figure out what you're going for. Like, again, you're probably right. Maybe it has something to do with them trying to ape the style of the anime, the cartoons. You're right. Scott Pilgrim. I remember when I turned to Patria, a friend of a show, who saw it with me at the Melbourne Film Festival. No one's going to get that. No one's going to get that, but that is the best comic book film that's ever been made. And I stand by that. I think it's a great film. But it kind of, because it was so stylized, and it kind of it almost pulled back, and you almost, the panel they turned him into a cartoon style panel, and they actually did at points have, an actual character of Scott on the screen. It kind of worked, but even the gunfights feel weirdly staged and fake. I can't put my finger on it, but but word that kept coming into my head was, like I said, it kept lacking impact. Like, the punches didn't seem to be landing. They didn't seem to be doing anything to the people who were being punched. The gunfight felt weirdly ill-motivated, like they weren't really trying to shoot each other. And, I enjoy that sort of gun ballet thing that happens. If you think of the Robert Rodriguez films from the 90s, El Mariachi, Desperado, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, he pulled that kind of thing. Or what's the Christian Bale one?
Equilibrium.
That one, that was beautiful. It's the best part of that film. But again, they're not pulling it off very well in this show. So I was like, I was deeply uninvolved by the time the show ended. And I was like, I don't think I want to watch another episode.
It's a real shame, because Cowboy Bebop is one of those shows that is so highly regarded, the anime, and I want to be invested. But even with the anime, there's something not quite engaging me. And I don't know what it is entirely. Maybe it's the strange disassociation of Spike as a character from his past to his present and his kind of jovial antagonistic relationship with Jet. I don't know. I don't feel like there's anything to invest in at the moment in the first 2 episodes. It's like, okay. And the episodes kind of feel long.
They do. It kind of felt like if it squeezed up to half an hour, that might have been a little bit more impactful.
Yeah.
It just kind of dragged a little bit for me. But then again, it's probably due to the fact that I just wasn't digging what they were selling me. But I definitely felt it might have been tightened up a little bit. But again, I'm not familiar with the story, so I don't know how much ground they have to cover in the 10 episodes or so.
But again, I kind of feel like less and less validity in that argument, because with Netflix, they have control over it. They control over every single element of it. They don't have to sit between time slots. They don't have to worry about putting advertising times in or anything like that. If they want to have a 36-minute episode one week and a 74-minute episode another week, if that's how the story flows best, then why not? They're still sticking to this old school idea of a rigid time slot for each episode. And I've talked about it ad nauseum at this point about the Disney Marvel stuff. Same with Star Wars stuff. They're in control of their own destinies. So why not just go, okay, let's just tell this story how we need to. This week, it is an hour long. Next week, it's going to be 47 minutes. Just tell the story you need to tell in the pace you need to tell it.
I guess the only thing there is if they've done some sort of study that said that people don't like watching shows where one episode is double the length of the other one, so they like the idea that if they go in and watch an episode of something, it goes for half an hour because that's what they expect it to be. And they know, well, I've got half an hour before I have to go to bed. I can squeeze in one episode of insert show here.
Well, we are the Armchair producers, so I'm just fulfilling our role.
I say, if there's certainly a show you can't predict the length of, it's this one.
That is true.
You know, you want to know how long this show is? Fuck you. That's how long it is. It doesn't bode well for us like Akira, right? Akira is, I kind of feel like Cowboy Bebop is held on a platform with something like Akira as being sort of the, some of the gold standards of that kind of, products that come out of Japan. That's not part of Ghibli, which of course they would never, ever, ever remake in the West. God, wouldn't that be a sacred cow? There would be that's probably cultural appropriation too.
No.
But Akira is currently everyone's had a go at Akira. I mean, a few years ago it was Jordan Peele was attached to it. I think everyone in Hollywood's been attached to it. Currently, it's Taika Waititi is attached to do the Akira remake. It kind of makes you wonder if is it possible to translate something like that that's so beloved and made in a completely different culture like Japan and translate it successfully into something a Western audience will find palatable?
Yeah. I think at the moment, the current person circling Akira is Taika Waititi.
Yeah, that's what he
which
said.
Seems like an... Oh, sorry. I was just trying to sort out some technical stuff. It's just an interesting choice.
Taika has apparently written a script and he's down to direct, according to IMDb.
Okay. Well, he has made a very successful career of himself, so, it's up to him to drop the ball, I guess. But, overall, I'm disappointed in Cowboy Bebop. I was hoping for, you said it earlier on the style, a bit more Serenity / Firefly. I can imagine that show lends a lot to Cowboy Bebop, the anime. It's just the melting pot of social styles going on in the movie, where you've got Asian influence with Latino and all sorts of stuff just going on all at once, all in the big screen. I can see the legacy of Cowboy in Firefly, but
The other thing it kind of, now that you mention it, it kind of reminded me of was that what was the Robert Rodriguez film?
Alita Battle Angel.
Alita Battle Angel. Yeah. Again, that was sort of your future-y world with dusty planet with different cultures all melding together.
Very, very true, very true. And another highly lauded manga that has been circling around for years trying to get a production going, but I just feel like it's lacking. I'm probably going to stick with it over time. I'm not going to stick religiously to it, but I will get through it. I hope that it ends strong because I think John Cho is pretty good. I think everyone plays their part pretty well. I think that they need to just speed everything up. The dialogue needs to be a bit snappier. The action needs to just really improve. It is just from the opening title credits, that boom, 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 jazz kind of stuff going on. It should be chaotic and frenetic and energetic, but it doesn't. The show doesn't really reflect that. And it needs to, I think, to be a bit more true to itself.
I just expected that jazzy sort of thing and sort of the heist mentality going on in there. I just half expected, Morty to Rick in and go, "You son of a bitch, I'm in." I don't know that I'm going to persist, which is a shame. Because I agree. I think John Cho is doing well. He's playing against type a little bit, which is not we would normally see him in this kind of role. We sort of you've seen him in a few different. I mean, I didn't see him in Sulu when I saw him in Harold and Kumar, but I think he's inheriting that role really well. And some of the stylized look and feel of it look good, but as I said to start with, some of it really looks cheap. So I find this is a very confusing experience.
Yeah, no, that I agree with that. I think that's very fair. Should we move on?
Did you want to have a chat about Wheel of Time? Because I'm very curious about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I just marked down a time there, 22:15. Okay, so Wheel of Time is one of the great book series of all time, heralded by fantasy lovers. There's Lord of the Rings, there's Narnia, yeah, thank you. I was thinking Lion, Witch of the Wardrobe. And Wheel of Time is kept up there, and now you've got stuff like A Song of Ice and Fire as well. Although that has been tainted somewhat because of the show's disappointing final seasons. Wheel of Time is Amazon Studios' first big foray into high fantasy, and this is a high fantasy show, and it is a high value show. It is you look at every single element of it, and there's high production values. They are really pushing big for it. And then next year they've got a TV show of the Lord of the Rings as well, so they're going heavy on this fantasy bit.
Big budget, expensive fantasy shit. Like this is some of the most expensive telly that's ever been made, if not the most expensive.
Yeah. But the Wheel of Time, some people might look at it as go, "Oh, it's just going to be the new Game of Thrones." That is very unfair. If you read the Wheel of Time books written by the wonderful Robert Jordan, rest in peace, finished off by Brandon Sanderson, it is a completed saga. There's no more, so they can't get ahead of the books or anything like what happened with Game of Thrones. And there are many people who have been waiting for this show. And I have been one of them for the last year and a half as I've been just gorging myself on the books. I am a big fan of Rosamund Pike as an actress as well, and she is easily the biggest name star in the whole show. For those who don't necessarily know the name, she's not been particularly like the star power character of anything, but she was in Jack Reacher, she was in Pride and Prejudice.
Gone Girl.
Gone Girl, yes.
She should have won an Oscar for Gone Girl.
Yeah, fantastic, solid performances, and she is taking on one of the iconic roles of the series called Moraine Sedai, or Moraine de Mordred, and it's in cursory. It's a very I've been there, done that, heard that storyline before, because it's all about this prophecy of the dragon reborn, and this is a world where essentially magic has fucked shit up. there are two sides to magic. There's a male and female side, and the male side has been tainted by evil. And any male who can touch this male magical side of the power, the one power as it's called, essentially ends up going nuts and goes bad in a big way. But there's this prophecy that the dragon, who is this in history was the person that essentially broke the world, he is going to be reborn because it's a wheel of time, and people leave and enter the weave of time and the fabric of time repeatedly. And he has been reborn, and she is looking for this dragon reborn to help guide him to essentially save the world. Sounds very familiar. Oh, a young person is going to be the one who saves us from the great evil. But there's so much more going on in this show, and it is really delightful. I don't want to go too far into it because it can go in potentially spoilers for people who are particularly sensitive. Now, is this a good adaptation of the book? Yes, because it is actually using the word adaptation. It is using the book as a very clear guide, but it is adjusting some bits that just would not translate well into live action, or it's amalgamating things just to speed up a little bit of storytelling. For example, the first episode, there's some stuff that goes on in there that I was sort of like, whoa, it really hit me because I knew what was supposed to happen. I've read the books, and other shit happened, and it was like, oh, that gives so much better balance to this character and that character, and it just gives them more gravitas rather than the hanger-on and the Ron Weasley of the Wheel of Time, where it's like, oh, it's just your best friend. It just so happens to get caught up in this. No, every character now has this legitimate reason for doing what they're doing, and it feels more solid, especially jumping in. The first 3 episodes are available on Prime Video, and they are a little long, but personally, I really enjoyed the length. It gave them good time, and so far the pacing has been very good. The production values are awesome. The relationships between the characters are slowly developing. The one niggle that I have is a common problem that I have with a lot of shows or movies where there is the savior character, in that character usually ends up being rather boring for most of the show until like the moment where they do step into the true hero role and stuff like that. And that does come through here quite a bit. But the rest of the performers around, the story, the building of the world that's going on, it's very, very good. I can understand why some people would be really pissed off because they are changing some things from the book, but I think they're doing intelligent changes.
Has a 7.4 overall on IMDb. Episode 1 has a 7.6, so that's pretty solid.
This is not the kind of show that I think you would enjoy, given
I was going to say,
history.
Do I need to have, if I haven't read the books, how much am I going to like this?
You don't need to read the books. There is, in a lot of ways, I feel like some of this feels like their test bed between bridging what was delivered on how they successfully delivered Lord of the Rings in the Peter Jackson movies to how they're going to deliver Lord of the Rings as a TV show. There is, Rosamund Pike does a narration of a little bit of exposition dump, setting up some of the world in the beginning, and it's very reminiscent of Cate Blanchett doing the opening bit of I could see it in the water, blah 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 blah, or whatever it is she says. They set it up pretty well, and because this is a whirlwind story where characters just get whipped up into the story, you are learning things as you go, and it does generally use the Terminator 1 rule of thumb of, if we're going to give exposition, we're going to do it while there's action going on, so it's interesting at the same time. So you do generally feel that pace going forwards, and it's those quieter moments where it is those more personal moments between 2 characters or 3 characters building that is refreshing to suddenly have this change of the action versus the drama side of it. So I don't think you need to know the book at all. I think that
you're probably right though. It doesn't fit into my general stereotype what I like, but I'm curious, so I'm going to try and watch an episode or two. For people who are curious about when we say this is when you say it's long, if people don't like that it's long, they need to remember how fucking big the books were. And if you'd like a read on how big the books were and how many of them there are, Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time book series has 2,782 named characters. Fuck off with all of that. And I thought Lord of the Rings was bad trying to remember who everyone was. You need a bloody flowchart.
That's the other thing that I think is going to, as the story progresses, as the seasons progress, it's going to be interesting to see how they manipulate the story, because there are books which do kind of go, okay, we're going to just ignore these characters because they're off doing something else, and we'll have a separate story that runs tangentially to this other side. So there could, in theory, be an entire season where we don't meet half of the party for a long time because there's two stories running at the same time. Or it could be jumping backwards and forwards a lot more, depending on how they're going to do it. It could very well piss people off. I am excited.
I feel like if you're buying into this, like, and I guess, I mean, I'm not a fan of fantasy, but I would say you need to have some patience here. This isn't Digital Fortress by Dan Brown. This is a like 4 paragraphs and like you're done. This is a deeply incredibly complex world that they've taken on here. And it take an insane amount of skill to then translate those incredible, deep books into something that you can film. But you certainly wouldn't include everything that's in the books. Like I go back to my Lord of the Rings loving friends back in the early 2000s who were pissed off. I can't believe they didn't put the Silmarillion in. Ben Bombadil wasn't in it. I'm like, so they're going to leave stuff out, but at the same time, even if you're leaving stuff out, it's going to be a long haul, right? You're going to need some patience to get on board with this thing, and
absolutely.
I think that's probably. I haven't even seen it, and I know I'd have to have it. I am very unlikely to find this to be my kind of show, but you never know your luck. I like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I think that for me, I think this is going to be a show that will either capture people or will not. And it'll be like the first few seasons of The Walking Dead in many ways, where we're learning the world as the characters kind of wake up into it and things like that. And people who got pissed off and said, oh, they spent too much time at the farm in Walking Dead, they might have the similar problem with this show, because there are going to be situations where they are huge chunks of the story and huge chunks of books take place in the White Tower or in this particular little tiny nook of this world that is so full of everything. And it's like, oh, come on, just fucking show me more of the Ogiers and show me what the fuck are the Trollocs doing right now? And it could get impatient. You've got to, this is a show where it is very, very important that they get all of the character casting right and that the characters are firing on all their cylinders, because as an audience member, if you are not fully invested, you need to be able to at least have that idea, oh, at least I'm going to see Matt Cawthon soon because he's just going to come back at some point, or whichever character you engage with. So it's going to be one that if you don't like it in the first, I'd say 2 episodes, no, you are not going to like it. If you get through the first 2 episodes, I think it's worth considering investing your time into it, because the story just develops, and everything that happens in the story, you kind of end up looking back later on and going, oh, fuck, that had ramifications. That had meaning. What the fuck did that person do? And it just builds on itself very, very nicely, but it is an investment of time.
You made a point. We go back to the start of the year, and the people who are out there going, why is WandaVision? Why is nothing happening? It's boring. The first 3 episodes are boring, and you're like, what the fuck? It's so fucking good. So people do get, and you made a good point about that season of Walking Dead just really set up the next few to come after it, and that was what made them so good. People have got no patience for a slow burn these days sometimes. But then again, it's on streaming. It's on Amazon. Uncle Jeff isn't short of cash.
Yep.
So I'm sure it'll get a fair run, hopefully, for those of you who like fantasy things. And everybody wants their own everyone wants their own Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're going back to the Game of Thrones well for House of Targaryen or whatever the hell it's called.
Yay.
So hooray. There's, at least for fans of high fantasy, you're going to have a lot of options because they're now planning The Witcher to be for 7 seasons. They've got this, which is at least, I think they've guaranteed 3 or 4 seasons. And Lord of the Rings is guaranteed for at least 3 or 4 seasons. We've got a Targaryen one. It's a good time to be into it.
It's a bad time to be a science fiction fan, though, because there ain't a lot of it out there for us.
That is sadly true. But don't worry, they're going to remake Firefly.
I am curious to see the new Foundation series on Apple TV at some point.
I have thoughts on that. I've watched the first 2 episodes. I'll go into it later on, not today, because there's only so much room in my head.
And I have an episode or 2 sitting around somewhere. I'll try and get around to it, but I'm not sure it's going to be my kind of sci-fi.
I don't think it is. Just my thought on it.
We did mention Apple TV. Do you mind if I have a chat about a couple of Apple TV products
go for it, yeah.
this week?
Where are we going?
So, the morning show, or I believe I've heard some people call it the Morning Wars. That might be marketed under a couple of different names depending on where in the world you are.
War sells in most places of the world.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the morning show, but I've heard people call it the Morning Wars. But anyway, for those of you who are long-time listeners, might remember we talked a little about this last year, about the start of just about when the unspecified virus of unknown origin sort of turned up and before it refused to leave and put its socks up on the coffee table. So this is about an inside look at the lives of people who help America wake up in the morning, exploring the unique challenges faced by the men and women who carry out this daily televised ritual. That's a very loose look at the plot. Basically, it's about a morning show, one of the biggest morning shows in America, but sort of in crisis for pretty much the entirety of the first 2 seasons of the show. It is star-studded, to say the very, very least. We have stars Jennifer Aniston, Reese Witherspoon, Billy Crudup, Mark Duplass, Steve Carell, and those are just you'll probably recognize a few of the other smaller players in there as well. Now, first season I really enjoyed, and basically that revolves around I think this is really the Me Too show, if you will. That we have a morning show with a very successful morning show hosted by the longtime host, beloved hosts Jennifer Aniston's Alex Levy and Steve Carell's Mitch Kessler. When it comes out that Mitch Kessler is actually a sexual predator. So I'm going to assume you've seen season 1 here. If you haven't, well, you're too bad, so sad. And he's outed, and that's kind of the arc of season 1. He's being outed as a sexual predator, and Reese Witherspoon's Brad Jackson is kind of parachuted in as being this plucky young upstart of a morning host who's sort of never really done anything. She should have come from the clouds, who is a very random pick by Billy Crudup's Corey Ellison, who plays the big wig network executive with a chip in his shoulder and a lot to prove. And so that's kind of the arc of the first season is Mitch Kessler's story and that coming out and how it's dealt with. And it sort of ends in tragedy where one of Mitch's victims ends up committing suicide. Season 2 had to, I believe, now do quote me, this is just what I've read, was written and locked and loaded and ready to go. And then the unspecified virus of unknown origin came along, and that kind of changed. If you're going to tell a story about the news, you can't really ignore that. So I believe it was rewritten and maybe had a bit of time to do so because, filming was delayed. And season 2 kind of is sort of a 2-track storyline with the bubbling COVID storyline underneath it the whole time, while on the surface they continue to deal with the fallout from the Mitch Kessler story and the fact that someone is now writing a book about that story and how that's going to impact the host of a show and Alex Levy and Jennifer Aniston's character. And it's sort of, I don't want to give anything too much away from there. As also the launch of a new streaming service for the network that the show's on. The second season, I read an absolutely brutal review of this in The Age this morning. I didn't think it was all as bad as The Age said it was, and so a few people have actually really stuck the boots in a little bit on the second season. But I think they're mistaken because the second season, it's not as concise as the first one. Okay. And it doesn't quite land its punches quite as well as the first one. So when I say that is it sets up these little elements that are going on in the story. Here's an interesting little twist, an interesting little potential conundrum that pops up. And then they don't pay it off. Or they don't pay it off very successfully or very satisfactorily. Or it just sort of gets blown away, brushed off. Or they spend an entire episode dealing with something you're like, could you have done half an episode on this? Like, do we need a full,
couldn't this meeting have been an email?
In our episode. So, for example, again, it's too much of a spoiler, but Steve Carell's character, Mitch Kessler, after becoming, leaving the show in disgrace in season 1, basically has moved to Italy in the second season. And there's one episode where Alex Levy, Jennifer Aniston's character, visits him in Italy. And that's basically the entire episode is them talking and, working through their issues together or whatever you want to call it in his mansion in Italy.
Okay.
And you're like, okay. And it takes, or the other problem is it'll take so long to pay it off. It's like, guys, could you be a little bit more punchy? I'm sorry I'm being a bit vague. I do want people to have a chance to see it. What I will say, one of the strong points for me was that undercurrent, the COVID undercurrent, is sort of bubbling away under the surface the whole time. And I think that's fascinating for me as well, and probably hopefully for other viewers, because we all lived through that a year and a half ago or so, right? A couple of years ago now, almost. And I don't know if you can remember what your head was doing in January, February 2020. I know. I went on a cruise over New Year's Eve 2019, 2020, which in hindsight was ill-advised. Probably somewhere you didn't want to be when there was a novel new coronavirus. It was on a boat with about 2,000 other people, and yet we didn't know. So
you survived. It's fine.
I got back just in time before that all sort of shut down the cruise industry. And I remember I was looking for a job in the first couple of months of 2020. And, I can remember being on the boat and seeing on the news, on the TV in my cabin, stories about China they were building like a new infectious diseases hospital. They did it in like 3 days or something crazy like that. And there was a bit of news kicking around about this new virus coming out of China and, yada, yada, yada. And you remember going, every other fucking year was a new virus out of China. Remember bird flu, and then there was SARS, and there was MERS. You're like, it never really came anything of note in the West, It never really, and at least in Australia, it never really became a massive problem. So I remember really paying it a whole lot of attention. And I remember not paying a whole lot of attention. I don't remember a lot of news from January and February about it. I mean, there was probably stuff there, but I was probably filtering it out because remember we had the bushfires here as well. And, if I was hearing it and seeing it, I guess I just didn't pay it a great deal of attention. It seemed to me, from my memory, from my experience, that he could have hit March, and then it just went to 11 straight away. Within about the first 2 weeks of March, they cancelled the Grand Prix here in Melbourne, and people were being sent home and stuff like that.
In irony, they cancelled the Grand Prix, and then it was off to the races.
So I'm sorry I'm going on about this, but this is just what I'm trying to. I think if you're like me and the Michelle, who I watch it with, far more on the ball than me. Far more on the ball. Apparently, was watching, going, "Oh yeah, I knew this was going to happen," but not me. So I kind of enjoyed that angle on the show is the fact that there's always little bits and bobs about COVID popping up on the news in the show, the morning show, and they'll be like, "Oh, we've got 2 stories today. We can talk about Donald Trump, or we can talk about, this new virus in China." And they're like, "Oh, we'll talk about Trump. No one cares about that." I enjoyed that angle, and the payoff is what it is. But that angle on the show is an interesting one for someone like for all of us, I guess, who've lived through that recent history. I found it interesting to sort of watch people then going through the same process as I was a year and a half ago, where we're like, yeah, there's this thing going on, but we're not really going to pay attention to that. So it's okay for most of the season. I'd say it's solid to good. The last episode, though, is a mess.
Oh, really?
It's like you kind of like, I think I ended up checking my phone quite a bit in the second half of the last episode.
Okay.
Which I don't like to do if it's a show I enjoy. So trust me, I wasn't doing that much for most of the episodes, all of the episodes in season 2 until the last episode. I was just kind of bored and spaced out because it just didn't really. It sort of went nowhere. It's kind of like kind of ran out of path and just fell over the finish line. So I feel like the people giving it really harsh reviews are doing so because their last episode was terrible. And you know what it's a bit like, you talked earlier with Game of Thrones. It leaves it leaves the house with a really bad season, or and everyone's like, Game of Thrones, but they forget how good and how popular and successful it was for the first however many seasons. It's just the last one kind of shit the bed. And then people, that's what you walk away with.
Yeah.
So if you like season 1, check out season 2. If you get Apple TV with your phone, which I think people do get the Apple TV with an iPhone.
They get a certain amount of time with iPhone. Yep.
That would be one I would check out.
Okay.
We've got I'll quickly cover one more before our sponsor break. Hopefully this week with sound. Nothing but the best for our audience. Sound. You want sound, you will have sound. Next week we'll introduce color.
Now you're talking craziness, my friend.
I would have a quickly cover the Tom Hanks movie Finch, which he premiered about 3 or 4 weeks ago on, again, Apple TV Plus. Was it Apple TV or Apple TV Plus? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. And this is the second Tom Hanks film to land on Apple TV in the last.
Oh, there was
years.
Greyhound or something, right?
Greyhound? Yeah. The war movie. And I didn't see Greyhound, but I got the impression it was a bit mediocre. This is also a deeply mediocre film. Finch. On a post-apocalyptic Earth, a robot built to protect the life of his creator's beloved dog learns about life, love, friendship, and what it means to be human. The robot is played by Julia Roberts at Bali and starts a yoga studio. It's
Fuck you.
I thought that was pretty good.
It was. I'll give you that.
It's as it sort of note, it's a post-apocalyptic Earth where the ozone layer has been ravaged by a solar flare, and hence Earth UV radiation levels are almost unbearable for humans on the surface now. Tom Hanks gets around in almost a spacesuit to be able to survive walking around the surface. He gets around with his dog in a camper van type thing, and his existence is basically driving around and trying to scavenge things from, the remnants of society, canned food and such from supermarkets and that sort of thing. He, as it sort of the synopsis notes, creates a robot to protect his dog when he's not around. The robot is played by the Caleb Landry Jones, who we talked about last week, who was in Nitram. And again, this guy is going places, I think. I mean, obviously he plays a robot in this, so it's motion capture. But he voices the robot as well, and it's phenomenal.
Okay.
The robot ends up giving itself a name. The robot's name is Jeff.
Right.
And he also has a small sort of dog-like robot for scavenging he calls Dewey, which is a nod, I believe, to Silent Runnings. Why is this film mediocre? This film is a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. I liked it a lot better when it was called Wall-E.
I was going to say this has the Wall-E sniff.
Had a very strong Wall-E influence, and I liked it when it was called Chappie. And I also enjoyed it when it was called Silent Runnings. So this is a film. This is deeply unoriginal filmmaking in the sense it rips lots of stuff from different places around the place to sort of inspire its universe and its characters. And it's not anywhere near as successful as any of those films. And I know a lot of people will look at that and go, "You calling Chappie successful?" Fuck, yes, I am. I liked it. I know nobody else.
Enough reason.
I like Neil Blomkamp. I know no one else does. Apart from everyone likes District 9, but no one likes anything else he's done. I like Elysium as well. So the first half of a film or so, probably the first 2/3 of it almost, you're kind of like, okay, this isn't very original, but it's charming. Tom Hanks plays Tom Hanks. Likable, benevolent. He has his rules about when he's scavenging. He's like, I won't cause unnecessary damage to other people's property. And I'm like, mate, I don't think they're using it anymore. They're fucking dead. He sort of like leaves things the way they are. He's got this very ethical sort of approach to, scavenging the apocalypse. That would be an interesting playthrough on Fallout, wouldn't it? Leave things as they are and be an ethical person. Wouldn't be much fun.
That would be really weird.
If anyone from Bethesda is listening, we're available. For large sums of money, of course.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
But it's kind of charming, and like Caleb Landry Jones's Jeff is really fun and entertaining and funny to be around. And the chemistry, if you can say chemistry between a CGI robot, Tom Hanks, and their dog, it's there and it's fun and it's entertaining. Like the dog, he's supposed to be the caretaker of the dog. The dog hates him. Wolf said he won't go near him. Jeff trying to, there's also a bit of Johnny Five in here. If you think about, what was that film?
That was Short Circuit.
Short Circuit, yeah. They're remaking that, by the way.
Shut up, Hollywood. Stop it.
So, but it's really kind of heartwarming and kind of fun and kind of charming with those kind of characters. You sort of, and if you like me, and I love post-apocalyptic films. I love the Fallout games. I love zombie movies. The apocalypse is my jam. And it's
the simple reason is because there's fewer people in it.
Well, there's always that, and life can be kind of miserable, and at least if it's an apocalypse, you have a reason to be miserable. This makes things a lot simpler in a lot of ways. And you don't have to worry about Twitter and fucking Nazis in the city anymore, hopefully. So I enjoyed the apocalyptic setting. That was entertaining, and the way it looked, and it looks like $1 million. This film, it really looks great. The art design and set design is brilliant. So you kind of going, okay, I'm with this, and there's like teaching Jeff how to be, more human, if you will. There's some fairly limited action scenes, but as it sort of gets along, it just sort of limps into the third act, and it just sort of goes, "There's your story." Could you please feel things now for the characters? Here are the characters. Feel things for them. And it just got really lazy for me in the third act. And you start to realize that any of the really big sort of confronting situations that you've been warned about, oh no, there's radiation, oh no, there's tornadoes, oh no, there's other humans and they're raiders, and you're like, they just sort of melt away and they don't actually have any real relevance or impact on the story. They're not really the danger that they were made out to be. They're just like, they were there while the story needed to be there, and then they went away. So I don't want to give away too many more spoilers about exactly why it limps into that sort of manipulative, emotional dreck that the last third of the film is, because you might enjoy it. But I found it really, really not really disappointing, and kind of, I got very bored very fast in the third act. And it's like, disappointing. I was kind of looking and going, this isn't so bad. Why are people saying it sucks? I'm like, oh, okay, that's why it sucks. So look, it's probably good for the kids, really, honestly. I mean, There's not a lot of that. There's not a lot of violence or death in it. There's not anything particularly gruesome or everybody on Earth's dead apart from Tom Hanks and his dog. But you don't see any real sign of that in the world. So you could definitely show it to the kids, and maybe they'd enjoy it a little bit more.
Okay.
The dog's cute. The robot's cute. Caleb Landry-Jones is an amazing actor, but it doesn't really ever coalesce into anything I would consider being, memorable.
Now, I just want to confirm something here. I'm looking at Finch on IMDb, and it's saying more like this. Movie suggestions that are more like Finch. Are these accurate, do you think? Red Notice with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot. James Bond: No Time to Die, Army of Thieves, Legend of Shang-Chi, Free Guy, Dangerous, John Wick 2, Dune, Benjamin Button, Suicide Squad, Jungle Cruise. Are any of those sounding remotely similar to this? Because I don't have that feeling.
No, I mean, there's not a lot of kung fu or zombies in this film, and no one's wearing a tuxedo. Though Tom Hanks does wear a suit at one point, so Tom Hanks next James Bond confirmed.
Don't put that shit out there. It could happen.
It could be similar to Army of Thieves in the sense that it kind of blows. I can notice that's a sequel. Sorry, I haven't seen the sequel. I'm thinking of Army of the Dead.
Army of the Dead.
That one sucked. Yes, I think there's something wrong with its algorithm. I guess the only reason I'm wondering why it says that is probably because these are the films. There aren't many new films that people can watch at the moment.
Yeah.
And these are kind of like everything new, except for John Wick 2, because that came out ages ago.
Yes, it did.
But everything apart from that, kind of a whole bunch, and Benjamin Button, a whole bunch of like new stuff that people have been able to watch on streaming fairly recently.
Yeah.
But you can't watch No Time to Die on streaming. I think it's still in cinemas.
That is still cinemas only.
Yes. I don't know. I'll have a word to the guys down at Amazon if you like.
You better.
They listen to me. Sorry, I think Amazon owned IMDb now, so that's why I'm saying Amazon.
Yeah. And that Jeff Bezos listened to us while he's just sitting on a toilet made of pure money.
On a penis rocket. It's a yes, Uncle Jeff. You ever wonder about someone like that and go, why do you still work? You got more money than God. Why would you work? Like, I don't know. I think he did just get out of Amazon fairly recently, but I
don't know if his day-to-day routine would, for most people, would be considered work. I think at the point that he is financially, just going into a room and just going, what would be good? And just throwing out this random idea and then going back to his office for 10 minutes and sitting there and going, yeah, I contributed today. Cool. All right. I'm going to go and I'm going to snort a line of $100 bills.
Off my favorite senator's butt.
Yes.
Is it time for our? I think it's time for our.
I think it's time for our sponsor
break before we start talking about snorting things off things.
Because that comes up in part 2 of the show.
All right, you're going to give that away. Our sponsors this week are the 70s.
The 70s, 1970s. Okay, so incredibly relevant, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you remember those online gift codes that they will lead out as well. Okay.
I think I got sound this week, so.
Goodness me. Okay.
We can't predict how cars will look in the 1980s, but it's a safe bet they'll be safer, better handling, and more economical, and that they'll demand a tire that's safer, better handling, and a tire that offers greater mileage. That tire is here now. The new generation Steel Cat. Uniroyal's all-new Steel Cat 280. This is the tire that's the 1980s a safer place. Already.
Chocolate move, strawberry move, ice coffee move, banana move. Move it, baby, move it. Move your body to it. Move it, baby, move it.
The bee is nature's storage expert. Its honeycomb cells are hexagonal, the most efficient shape for storing in the hive. You see, it's not always how much space you've got that matters. It's how you use it. This principle has helped make Dexion the leading supplier of warehouse storage systems in Australia. Talk with Dexion. By storing more efficiently, we believe you can make more honey too. Dexion.
Joyce Main's doing it again, but this time she really means business because the Sharp Corporation will pay for this commercial when Joycey sold $1 million worth of Sharp stock, and Joycey's keeping her fingers and everything else crossed.
Joyce, how are you going to sell $1 million worth of Sharp products?
Well, hopefully, Harry, that's going to be easy by offering my customers my best possible prices. And here are a few examples.
Touch-tune 33cm Sharp color TVs, suggested price $529, Joycey's price $399, a difference of $130. Dolby stereo cassette deck with Sharp's automatic program search system was $229, now $179, save $50.
But Joyce, what about all these microwave ovens?
I'll just have to clear them out regardless.
How much is this one, Joyce?
These are my EMS demonstration models, Harry. My new price was $297. My demo price, $199. That's a saving of $98.
Why buy elsewhere when you could be paying too much? Joyce Main, 113 Parramatta Road, Auburn.
Somewhere in the world, a plot's revealed, a man resigns, a nation reels. Somewhere in the world, a story breaks for the Australian. Somewhere in the world, a deal is made, a star is born, a match is played. Somewhere in the world, a story grows for the Australian. The Australian, the Australian, working through the night to bring you the world each day. The Australian, the Australian, covering the world and all the nation, right across the land they rise to the Australian, the Australian, working through the night to bring you the world each day. The Australian, the Australian.
Datsun Stanza won the
Oh,
rugged
look at this,
78
ladies and
Cross
gentlemen.
Rally just 3
Oh,
weeks
look at
after
this,
its
ladies and
Australian
gentlemen.
launch. Datsun Stanza, the sporty 1600 with all those famous Datsun features: style, economy, rally-bred reliability. Datsun
It's true, it is. It's a stylish box.
driver's car.
Real value from $5,499 now.
But there you go, ladies and gentlemen.
My first car was Datsun.
Okay.
They're a
I
quality,
know what that
quality-
is.
A quality vehicle. Quality vehicle for Datsun. I put that car through hell, and it stayed together.
You're not that bad of a driver.
Oh, when I was 19, I was.
Hey, I just suddenly had the image of you driving the Datsun with the beret.
The Beret was an addition of a number of years after that.
Ah.
I don't think I had the Beret at that. I'm certain I didn't have a Beret at that time, but I had definitely subpar driving skills. But it was a solid vehicle and it got me around.
Well, that's all you need from a car, honestly. Now, let's get on with the rest of our show, shall we? Should we talk about our chain movie?
Let's do that. So we're coming in a bit late this week, but I kind of with a sort of we had to mix things up.
Actually, before we go into our chain movie, I just have a few words on Last Night in Soho.
Oh yes, this is the new Edgar Wright film.
Yeah. So I got to see this at the cinema, which is always the best place to watch an Edgar Wright production because he has got very good visuals in every single one of his movies. So I'm going to do this right. I'm going to actually tell you what the synopsis is for Last Night in Soho. So Last Night in Soho... Okay, just got to rate it first. An aspiring fashion designer is mysteriously able to enter the 1960s where she encounters a dazzling wannabe singer. But the glamour is not all it appears to be, and the dreams of the past start to crack and splinter into something darker. I would say this is a fairly ensemble piece because it's got some legends of the screen in there, as well as some legends in the making, I feel. The main character, Eloise, is played by Thomasin McKenzie, who most people probably won't really know. She's not done too much.
She was in Jojo Rabbit, though.
Yes, she was in Jojo Rabbit, which has probably been her biggest thing to date, certainly for getting a name out there. She was also in M. Night Shyamalan's Old, but that didn't seem to do very well, so I don't know how many people actually saw that. She was also in The King for Netflix with Timothy Chalamet, which I actually enjoyed, and she was good in that too. But the big stars in it, we've got Anya Taylor-Joy, who plays Sandy, and she is, for lack of a better descriptor, when Eloise transports back to the 60s, she is following the life of Sandy. You've got Matt Smith, famous for being Doctor Who, as well as in The Crown. He plays the character Jack. Diana Rigg is in this as Miss Collins.
She of the Avengers.
Yes, she of the Avengers, and she looked fabulous in that, even though it was a god-awful show.
Wait, we're not talking about Marvel's Avengers. This is a British TV show from the
British TV,
the
yes.
60s, and this is why when the Avengers was released in the UK, it wasn't called the Avengers; it was called Avengers Assemble.
Mm-hmm. And she was, most people will probably know her modern time from, she was Lady Tyrell in Game of Thrones. But she is a genuine icon of cinema.
Or was.
Yes. Oh, wait, is she dead?
She died last year.
Oh, fuck, no. Oh, god damn it. That's sad. But she was phenomenal. She was a true stalwart. The other big name is Terrence motherfucking Stamp.
General Zod himself.
General Zod himself, yes. And then they've built up a rather nice little collection of people that I've never seen perform before as the fellow students that surround Eloise as she is at London Fashion Academy. So is this a good movie? It is really, really hard to say, honestly. This is easily the most serious and out of left field movie that Edgar Wright has made to date, considering his Cornetto trilogy of Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, The World Ends, and then Scott Pilgrim, and then his misadventures into Marvel's Ant-Man, and then going on to Baby Driver. They've all had this level of comedic charm to them. This is definitely more of a drama, a horror, thriller, suspense, mystery. There is, in all honesty, there's no brevity in this thing because it wears its maudlin on its sleeve, I guess. And I feel like that's part of the problem that I have with kind of reviewing this movie, because it is genuinely stunning. It is beautiful. The way that he mixes the different... it's almost like he uses two entirely different film techniques for the 60s versus the present day. And it works really well to help isolate and identify which era you're in beyond the obvious things of the cars, the set dressing, and things like that. Just the way that he uses color, particularly the reds and the blacks in the 1960s, is really intoxicating, which is part of what is the allure of the 1960s, particularly for Eloise, who's a young student who is fascinated by the 60s. The major problem I have with this is it telegraphs every single one of its punches far, far, far too soon. There is not a single person that will be able to get through this movie and go, I never saw that coming, because every twist and turn is painfully obvious from the get-go, and it's really disappointing. I feel like this is definitely ends up being more of a style over substance movie for Edgar Wright, while I don't think it is a flop in any regard, because every performer is great in it. I just think that the story is the lacking element here, which is a shame because Edgar Wright knows how to keep a good tight pace, and that is somewhat lacking in this. He has generally controlled his movies better, I guess. So it's a shame. I would love to get your opinion on this, Trav, because I think that you would either really like it or really feel disconnected from it.
Well, I'm definitely going to see it because it's Edgar Wright and he's earned a watch.
Yeah.
Just on
100%.
the side, apparently he's down to direct a remake of A Running Man next, which is going to be fascinating. What an odd choice.
Yeah. Although, hot take for casting Simon Pegg as Killian.
I thought you were going to say Matt Smith as Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. Because he's very British, Edgar Wright, sort of, a cup of tea.
It would be kind of fitting, though, the Terminator connection, because Matt Smith was very briefly in Terminator Salvation.
Genesis.
No, Terminator Genesis, yes, but that got nixed because that didn't spawn any other movies, and Arnie was in Terminator, so who knows? We could see it. Very interesting. Yeah.
Maybe Drew Carey could be the game show. They actually got a real game show host,
Oh my god, that would be kind of brilliant.
We'll see what happens. I'm skeptical because the original is a masterpiece of action. But anyway, I will see. I am curious to see next Last Night in Soho, and I should really get around to it considering I live 5 minutes walk from the cinemas here. Now we're actually allowed to go back to the cinema with no restrictions. I think.
Yeah. But I think part of the problems with this movie and this story is the high-profile casting of particular characters. It's like, okay, you don't get that character in unless you're doing something specific. And obviously, there is my superpower of being able to ruin movies for myself. But I think that this is just too obvious with everything. And it's like, okay. Yeah, they said that line, which I've heard that line in many other movies, and it means this, so that's probably going to happen, and she is obviously going to be this and that, and blah, 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 blah. And there's a whole, like, the opening sequence is really beautiful because it is Thomasin McKenzie just got some wireless headphones on, and she's just absolutely loving this 60s music, and the music in the 60s is really wonderful and very quintessential. It doesn't, the type of music that was played in the 60s just doesn't fit anywhere else in music history. It's wonderfully unique. And she's wearing this dress that she made out of newspapers and things like that, and it looks cool, and she's just totally in the zone. And then she sees this reflection in the mirror of her mother. And you learn very quickly that her mother is dead, and you get suggestions that she sees her mum from time to time, whether it's some kind of mental illness. It's never highlighted or explained, but there's just that little element. And that every now and then just comes back, and you kind of feel like, okay, they're still keeping me, they're still reminding me gently of, oh, remember, this is a story element. But it doesn't go anywhere.
That's disappointing.
And it's sort of like, okay, well, honestly, what was the point of that? It doesn't explain what's happening to Eloise. It doesn't feed into the story directly. There's no kind of emotional connection or closure for the character of Eloise and her mum, which ties into their love of the 60s or anything like that. It's like, okay, that ends up just being wasted. And while it's nice to give this semi-human moment to Eloise, she is put through the ringer. This is quite a horror movie, and in typical horror movie fashion, the female lead is put through hell. It's the trope of the genre, and she comes out better at the end. There's no surprise there. It's not a surprising ending. But at the same time, it's like, okay, I think you would try to shoot for something a bit more deep and meaningful here, but did you run out of time or what? I don't know. It doesn't feel complete, and it's particularly, I guess I'm being particularly skeptical about it and critical about it because it's Edgar Wright, because he has made
Well,
a
he
name
set the
for
bar
himself.
pretty high. He hasn't really
Yeah.
directed a flop to date. I mean, no, Scott Pilgrim didn't make money, but that is a genius film. But everybody who his intended audience loved that film.
Yes, exactly. He knows. He always shoots for. He knows what audience he's going for, and he nails it every time. This doesn't.
Okay,
Which
that's
is a shame.
hardcore.
Yeah,
I
it's a shame.
I will have to check it out, and we'll see if it's your superpowers betrayed you again.
They always do. They always do. I've just grown to accept it now.
Well, maybe
but yeah,
Hollywood can stop making such predictable films. Should we move on to the Chain movie then?
Let's move on to Chain movie, yeah, because we're talking about a classic this week, ladies and gentlemen. Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Okay, we followed Donald Sutherland here, of course,
Yes.
from Ordinary People, which we did a pretty decent job of talking about that, considering we watched it 2 months earlier. This one I watched this week, and I've seen this one a number of times. This is, of course, based on a remake of an earlier film from the 50s, and is based on the Jack Finney novel Body Snatchers. It's an unusual one in the sense that the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1956 is generally considered something of a classic as well. And when you remake a classic, odds are you're going to fuck it up. But they haven't done it here. So this is probably one of the greatest remakes of all time, one could argue, because it's actually incredibly well done. Let's not mention the 2007 Nicole Kidman version, because it sucked diddly yucked. When strange seeds drift to Earth from space, mysterious pods begin to grow and invade San Francisco, California, where they replicate the residents into emotionless automatons, one body at a time. This is directed by Philip Kaufman, who probably isn't a very particularly well-known name, but he probably should be. Maybe a little bit better known as a writer in some spheres. He wrote a little film called Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. A little film, you may not have heard it. The Outlaw Josie Wales, The Wanderers, which are two very, very well-known westerns. The Right Stuff, a very, very well-known film from the 80s. I think he also directed The Right Stuff and The Wanderers. And, of course, he directed this. So probably that Indiana Jones character, that might have some legs. I don't know what you think.
No, I think they're just going to tap out at 3. I think that's probably why.
I think 3 is all in the. I've only seen the first one.
Now, this I want to straight away call out the beginning of this movie because this is visual storytelling at its fucking best. Because there's no monologue explaining aliens were looking at our world with envious eyes. Blah, blah,
there's no Orson Welles voiceover. There's no Marlon Brando.
Yeah, it is just bacteria and movement, and it just looks alien. It looks fucking awesome. It looks scary. It looks like you don't want to fucking touch that shit. And then you just through these visuals of just showing this close movement of microorganisms and tendrils moving and things like that, and then it cuts to space, and then it cuts to rain, and you just instinctively know, oh fuck, it's been transported into here, and then and then the visuals of seeing it just kind of leach out across all the leaves of the plants and things and start replicating things. This is fucking phenomenal for when this movie was made. This movie was made in 1978.
It looks like it's almost like a nature documentary.
Yeah.
In the first 5-10 minutes, where it's just focusing on this goo in the ground and being in the rain, and you can see it sort of hanging off plants, and then it's sort of spawning flowers and stuff, and the spawning of the so these are the space seeds that land on Earth. The first scene where they're in space floating around, that scene shows its age a little bit in the sense they look kind of like something from the original Star Trek or Doctor Who. Like someone's filled up condoms with like helium and just gone whoa, that could have been what they were, it kind of looked like that. But once they land on Earth,
don't ruin the magic.
Once they land on Earth and you sort of have this almost nature documentary again, no voiceover, no dialogue at all, just telling you, just your eyes telling you what's going on. That was beautifully done. The flowers that the space seeds spawn on the plants that they land on, they look incredible.
Yeah.
Like I can only imagine sitting there watching it a couple of times going, how did they do that? It was stop motion is what I'm thinking. Probably stop motion. Because that's kind of, they didn't have CGI. And, well, no, this film doesn't, it didn't look like CGI. That wasn't CGI.
No.
I mean, they had some CGI in 78, but that wasn't it. So I can only imagine it was stop motion, and it was gorgeous stop motion. Like, it was flawless. Like, none of that jerkiness you sort of associate with that kind of filming technique. And you're right. It really sets the scene well.
It sets you instantly to not trust what's happening, because it takes ages before we actually even get to genuinely meet any of the characters. Like, we have Elizabeth Driscoll's character come in, but we only ever see her from the back, and she just picks this plant, and then she's just going about her day. You never really get a shot of her face or anything. She doesn't really talk of anything meaningful. She gets home and she has this very disconnected interaction with her husband, boyfriend. It's brilliant use of just letting the visuals talk, and you just feel this kind of dread. And then the conversation, the camera is in a corridor with, like, you see reflections of what's happening in the bedroom, and just her sort of like going, just explaining about the plant and how it's already growing tendrils and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I don't trust that fucking thing. Nothing should grow that fucking fast. Everything just adds a little bit more every time. It's wonderful.
You noted it well. You don't trust anything, and I think that brings us to the theme of this film, and the most operative word I kept thinking all throughout the film is paranoia. It's interesting that the original film, which I'm vaguely familiar with, I saw it a long time ago when I was in uni, is essentially an allegory. It's a very allegorical film for communism. It's generally about, the fifth column of, they walk amongst us, automaton communists who, silently taking over the world. It was filmed in '56 under the atmosphere of McCarthyism. That sort of thing, the House Un-American Activities Committee, and it did that very, very well, and that's probably why it's considered a classic. That allegory here is less direct, if you will. It's not sort of going, again, pointing the finger at something as obvious as, say, communism here. But again, I think you have to remember the time in which this film was made, because I think that's important. This film was made in 1978. So if we just stop for a second and think about what was going on in the world in 1978, we've now come to the end of the Vietnam War a couple of years earlier. We've now been through Watergate a couple of years earlier, 75, I want to say, or 74. Anyway, so we have Watergate, we have Vietnam. We are in a deeply mistrustful time, especially in the United States where this film was made. And it's interesting that we're in a very distrustful time now as well. Deeply mistrustful time, but in a very different kind of paranoia these days. It's kind of like paranoia in the 70s was based on the shit that actually happened. Whereas paranoia now is based on,
I heard someone say this, and they were telling me about it on the toilet.
Joe Biden is keeping children in tunnels under the pizza restaurants,
It's just
and
standard.
JFK is coming back from the dead this week. That's not bullshit, by the way. That actually happened. Go and check it out. The QAnon fuckwits. We went to Dallas the other week to wait for John Kennedy and John Kennedy Jr. to come back from the dead and do stuff, I guess. But I'm off topic. That's really happened. But it's interesting that this is the kind of film that came out of the 70s and the films like this, or I'm thinking The French Connection, All the President's Men, that Condor film Redfield was in. I can't remember the name. Day of the Condor.
Day of the Condor.
And there was an element of a Deer Hunter, the Michael Kaminsky film. There was that vibe of paranoia and mistrust of authority that kind of underwrote so many of these films. And I think it's writ large in this film. This film is all about paranoia, because you can't trust anything.
Nope.
you can't believe your eyes. You can't trust. It's almost like make a fascinating combination piece with The Thing, because you can't trust that anybody is who they say they are.
Yeah.
And those wonderful scenes that keep popping up in the film. You mentioned earlier the character of what's her name, Elizabeth, who her husband is one of the first people who is taken over or replicated by the pods, and she's one of the first people who goes, "That's not my husband." And then we can encounter other characters in the film going, "My husband isn't my husband. My wife isn't my wife anymore. It's somebody different. They're not themselves." And I think that's a really effective technique, because if you've ever been in a situation where you thought you knew somebody, and it turns out they're not who they say they are, or almost overnight, if you can think about somebody you've known for long enough to be married to them, and they like that, all of a sudden overnight turn into somebody different, that's enough to kind of fuck with your head a little bit and go, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think the filming techniques as well, it's beautifully shot, but in a very unusual way.
Yeah, it's almost like there was a lot of it that kind of reminded me of almost like Bullet, in the way that it was kind of shot a little bit documentary, and it was just really showing this rough side of San Francisco. And I don't know, whenever I think of San Francisco, I've been there, and it's this bright, beautiful, very open, friendly, lively city. And then I think about this movie, and I think about Bullet, I was just talking about, and it shows a very different character and face of that city. And it does it so well that, again, it just kind of puts me off kilter for the whole thing. Like, I just don't trust going down that corridor. I just don't trust going everywhere. It uses the city to really elevate.
The city becomes a villain in a way, almost like if, in a different way. But if you think of a film like Dark City, the Alex Proyas film, where the city is a character in of itself. But I must say, you haven't been to San Francisco lately, have you?
Not recently, no.
I was going to say it's not bright or friendly anymore. It smells, and there's lots of very, very poor, sketchy-looking people all over the place. Friend of the show, Patria, was quite happy to walk through the homeless encampment to get where we wanted to go, because, of course, she was.
She is fearless.
That was a couple of years ago, though. But no, you're right. There's something about I can't put my finger on exactly what it is about the way it's shot and the way Kaufman chooses to frame his scenes in the city. But there is a palpable dread throughout the city at all times. Or I think of a scene where they're driving through the street and have a crazy man run out and bang on their window, go, "They're coming, it's not, whatever." And then he runs around the corner and gets hit by a car. Excuse me. And he says, Donald Sutherland's character sort of says, "Oh, the police sees the police go around the corner. They'll help him." And then they turn the corner, and everybody's just standing there watching. Deeply, deeply unsettling. What did you make of Leonard Nimoy in this? What an odd character to see turn up.
He was really good in it. I really liked his portrayal of the character, but at the same time, his character is persistently antagonistic, even before turns in the character role. He's just like he's immediately someone who you just don't want to trust, because the first conversation that you hear him, he's basically talking a woman around and saying, "No, it's not your husband, it's you. You're clearly the one having problems. Let's talk this out. It's okay. You'll get over this." And that's always what he's saying. So like, "Oh, a good night's rest and she'll be fine," and blah, 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 blah. And he's just always, to me, I always just look at him and look at his character and I just think, "Oh, fuck you. Fuck you. Why are you getting so much respect from Donald Sutherland? Why?" And why do people really approve of what you're saying and doing here? Because you're, oh God!
Do you think maybe the film is saying something about some of the ideas of the time? So if we think of again, I wasn't alive. Well, I was alive in 1978, but I wasn't in San Francisco, and I sure as hell wasn't friends with famous. Wasn't up with what was popular in the zeitgeist at the time. You
were too cool for it.
I was one. Geelong wasn't exactly the center of a bustling movement at the time. But he almost
never will be.
Strikes me as the 70s and 80s were kind of famous in for a psychological or a cult kind of movement or self-improvement movements. If you think about it, people go to those join big cults and sort of the cult of self-improvement. The I'm okay, you're okay generation.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if this is the director and the writer and director sort of saying, well, look how respected this guy is by the characters in the film. And this woman we meet him talking to, she knows she's not right. She knows things aren't right, but she puts all her faith in the things that this, borderline charlatan psychologist is telling her, because of the faith that she puts in, his ideas and the idea of psychology being a science, and it's fairly young, and it says the person who's studying psychology. But I think there are some pretty. I don't think anybody who can study psych can steer away from some of the ugly things that the science has been behind or had its name attached to. And so I'm just wondering if maybe that was what they were trying to get at there, in the sense that people put so much faith and belief in this movement, the I'm okay, you're okay. The Est was the name of the movement. I don't know if you never really watched The Americans, did you?
No.
There's some of the characters in The Americans attend Est classes, and it was this big self-help movement. And then maybe it's their way of being critical, because Leonard Nimoy is kind of a bit of a red herring in this, in the sense of he's the person who kind of steers them towards danger rather than away of it, largely born of his arrogance.
Yeah, it's very true. And the thing that with his character that does somewhat irk me is never get a real sense of, I kind of finished up and thought, wait, when did he get duplicated?
I think it's kind of a fun part of this film. You're not really sure when everyone's duplicated, right? They just suddenly turn up one day and they're wearing a suit, because apparently that means you're an alien.
So buy one of our merch, ladies and gentlemen.
No one will think you're an alien, because aliens wouldn't dress like this. I enjoyed seeing a very young Jeff Goldblum in this. Goldbluming his very best Goldblum in this. Like, folks who think he's the Goldblum act is a new thing.
Nope.
No, it's been around for 40 plus years. He was Goldbluming hard in this film. And Veronica Cartwright, wonderful in this film. And it kind of took me a minute to go, she was an alien. That's why I know who she is. And I wonder if it's the scream in this film is what I got hired for Alien the next year.
Well, yeah, because I watched this after watching Alien, and I just found it. I always just assume it's automatic, kind of reverse psychology for me, because she was so fucking annoying and loud and emotional in Alien, and seeing her be the one who kind of works out, you just fake it and you pretend you don't know anything and you can get around it. It's for me, just personally, is always entertaining just to kind of go, that's really funny to see this character being the one who is emotionless.
One of the things I really enjoyed about this film, apart from the highfalutin stuff we've been talking about so far, the idea of paranoia, I enjoyed the paranoid feeling of the film very much. But how often do you see any kind of, let's say, a science fiction drama, a science fiction thriller, where the protagonist is a guy who works for the health department and looks like Donald Sutherland, and Donald Sutherland looks like someone who works for the health department in 1978. He's not a former Marine or Navy SEAL, working as a cook or anything like that.
I'm just a cook.
He looks like a dude who works in a lab all day, right? And he is the protagonist of a film.
Yeah. And I would also, equal that by saying the romance that develops over time, or is, it sheds its skin like an onion.
Like a parfait.
It's parfaits are delicious. It's really well done because it's not overt. There's not those musical interludes just suggesting it. It's not kind of spoon fed to us like it would be in a modern movie. This is again just organically just letting the story tell us and letting the story show us their bond developing over time.
It's an interesting love story, and I'll go back to the love story inverted commas from Shang-Chi we talked about last week, which was fairly subtle for a modern film. I mean, it's probably not as subtle as this, but we didn't have if Shang-Chi had been made in the 90s, there would 100% have been a hot sex scene at some point in the film.
Yeah,
100%.
Yep. Pan to the right, and then it's a burning fire. Maybe
a shower scene where we see Shang-Chi's butt
just the hand.
Or something like that. But in this film, as you sort of say, you got a sense from Donald Sutherland early on, his character Matthew has a longing for Elizabeth very early in the film, despite the fact she's married. I think she's married to the guy who I forget his character's her husband. I forget her husband's name.
Jeffrey Howell.
We know if we don't know if it's a husband, or we're not really quite sure, but it's not necessarily explained. But she's not available. But you kind of sense a bit of longing from Matthew early in the film, and that sort of builds as that relationship, as they sort of grow closer through this intense situation. I was like with you. It would have been done very, very differently today, and I enjoyed that it wasn't actually necessarily consummated at any point in time.
Yeah, it was literally I think one kiss, and at different times them saying "I love you," and that was kind of their romance.
The final scene in this film is iconic. I mean, it's one of the great final sequences in cinema history.
Yes, 1000%. It is it's a sequence that has been lampooned, parodied, memed, and everything up the wazoo, but it still packs a punch today.
That sound is incredible. The screech of the pod people is just terrifying. Apparently it was a pig scream initially, and they did some shit to it. Obviously, they make it sound a little bit more unnatural, but
okay.
I mean, that would have scared the crap out of it. And it's kind of different because it's coming.
Yeah.
But like the first time you saw it, apparently they had a scripted optimistic ending where Donald Sutherland would have given a knowing look at Veronica Cartwright as she walked up to him in outside that's actually San Francisco Town Hall. But Philip Kaufman decided didn't shoot it because he didn't, despite the fact he didn't want to use it, he just didn't want to tempt the studio to try and insert it into the film without his consent. So he just didn't film it. And you're like, oh, it's one of those moments where you go, what you leave out is just sometimes every bit as important as what you leave in.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that I would just like to touch on as well is the score. The music for this is brilliant. Just brilliant. It captures the period really well, obviously, but it just so definitely just, again, cranks up the paranoia, the fear, and the antagonism. It just swells throughout the whole thing as more and more and more people in the California are being consumed. The music just feels like it's closing in around you and suffocating you as well, and it does it so well. It's really, really good. I'm actually going to look.
Interesting. It's done by Denny Zeitlin, who I've never heard of, and interestingly, this is the only film he ever got a composer credit for.
Damn.
He only had a soundtrack credit for three things. One of which was Sesame Street.
That would be a really weird, creepy way to end this. Donald Sutherland go.
I think it'd be even creepy if that was Big Bird going. Oh!
Oh no! I want to see a Muppets version of this.
That would be cool. You're right. It's kind of remarkable because it is notable for being every element of this is nigh on perfect. I mean, the only criticism I think you'd have of it, and that's completely irrelevant in a way, is that some of the effects. We talked about the effects at the start and how good they were, how well they hold up. Some of the monster effects later in the film, especially the pod people's bodies, look a bit naff, but. Yeah, it's a 43-year-old film, so you're not going to complain too hard about that.
For its time, it looks good. Even the hybrid, the dog man thing, it looks weird, but it's supposed to look weird and mutated, and it's like, oh, it doesn't look quite as horrific as they wanted it to look, I think.
No, I mean, I did show somebody recently The Thing who had never seen it before, and they weren't as impressed by the effects as I expected them to be. So, I just think it's just something about that time period that kind of, they were. It probably wasn't a particularly high budget film at the time.
Yeah, but
I just one last thing that popped into my head just now is that just to give you an idea about how successful this film is at what it does, it feels very claustrophobic to me. And it's set in a city the size of San Francisco, which is a big place. And so, yet somehow it still feels claustrophobic because they're always surrounded, and you can't, as you sort of noted at the start, they can't trust anyone. So if you haven't seen this film, you really do deserve to give yourself a favor and have a look at it because it's and in a way, every bit as relevant now as it was 40 years ago.
Absolutely, I 100% recommend this. I'm so glad that I picked it. But you said that you've got a doozy for us to go on to next. Where are you taking us?
Do I ever?
Who are we following?
We're going to follow the one, the only, the inimitable Jeff Goldblum.
Okay.
It is an obvious choice. And unfortunately, this one's free. You can watch the whole film on YouTube. We are going to the 1988 comedy, sci-fi, adventure, romance, classic Vibes.
Oh, Jesus.
Starring the one, the only Cyndi Lauper. I believe in their only starring role.
Oh boy, dude, you are giving me a tough place to go on from this.
Julian Sands is in it. He's been in a heap of shit. Michael Lerner's in it, and he's been in like hundreds of films. So you'll.
Oh, I've got Peter Falk. That'll get me to some interesting places. That's all right.
And
Steve Buscemi. Holy shit!
There's a few different people in this. You'll be able to find something interesting out of this, I'm sure.
Like
I said, the entire film is on YouTube.
All right. That's gonna be fun. For those who don't know, Vibes, the plot is two psychics are hired to find the location of a lost Incan city located somewhere in the Ecuadorian mountains that is said to hide great treasure.
And note there is a grammatical error in the synopsis. Just that, and I think that's very appropriate for this film.
This is sitting at a 5.7 on IMDb. So
look, it's not exactly Manos Hands of Fate. But yes, I it's a change in pace from a noted classic like Invasion of Body Snatchers or Ordinary People. I just sort of felt like we needed to get back to basics and where we started with. We started this with Streets of Fire.
I kind of want to follow Cyndi Lauper to the Goonies.
Or you could follow the writer of the film, Lowell Gans, to Splash. It's your call. You've got all sorts of places you can go.
I will come up with something, and I look forward to enjoying the vibes, man.
Vibes.
Vibes.
You've never seen anything quite like it.
If that's not the tagline of the movie, I'm disappointed.
Big time. Yeah. I will. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but oh my god, Van Dyke Parks is in it. What an odd little film this is. For those who don't know, Van Dyke Parks is a musician, best known as a musician who worked with Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys on some of their best known stuff. And he did the Departed soundtrack. So, and Popeye. Yeah, what an odd little film. I'm looking forward to this.
All right. Well, that is next week's Chain movie, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff Goldblum in Vibes from 1988.
The golden age of psychic comedy adventure movies.
They did have a moment, didn't they?
Very much for Citizen Kane of psychic movies, this one. Right up there with Dinner for Schmucks.
Now, I have one last little thing that I would like to just call back to.
Shoot.
And kicking the boots in. And I'm going to get the boots into a very popular man. That is one Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a message for him. Stop trying so hard. He does what he does well. And he is such a shameless self-promoter, and it's hurting his roles now, hurting his performances. I'm speaking directly because of Jungle Cruise. So Jungle Cruise is the latest ride to movie adaptation that Disney have done, and every single thing that you might think, oh, it's a bit like that, it is a bit like that. It is a lot of Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz The Mummy. It is a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean, and it is not as good as any of those. Purely because everyone involved is trying too hard. And in particular, Dwayne Johnson, because he is now very quickly fallen into, we talked about it last week with Ryan Reynolds and Free Guy, where he's reached saturation point of being Ryan Reynolds / Deadpool in every movie. Going even further, you've got Johnny Depp, who has had essentially the same weird character for the last 15, 20 years. Dwayne Johnson is, again, the same kind of character, but it's for this movie, it's because he's just pushing too hard, and it's like, okay, you've got natural charisma, just ease back, please. Emily Blunt is wonderful in this movie, but she's, again, trying a bit too hard, whereas Rachel Weisz, in a very similar role, was much more organic and natural, and it just flowed more. So it's a big missed opportunity, because Emily Blunt is a great actress, and Dwayne Johnson is a solid performer. He knows how to do his things, but everyone, including the director, are all just trying so hard to go, look, aren't we so lovable? Aren't we so good? Isn't this such an enjoyable ride? Everyone's having fun. And I'm like, yeah, you don't need to bring my attention to it. You don't. So just stop. Just stop. That's all I wanted to say.
I've always felt that Dwayne, like, I remember when he first started acting, I always thought he had a massive amount of potential. So I was never overly surprised he became the big star that he became. What's been disappointing, I guess, for me as a fan of a man, as a professional wrestler and sort of a fan of his acting, is how little he's ever stretched himself. He's never really stepped outside his comfort zone that I can think of. Fair enough, people are paying.
One movie, and that was Southland Tales, which was a bad movie.
Maybe, but geez, that film was a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But he did play something. He hasn't really ever done a lot of that. So I haven't seen that in a very long time. But he just does. Again, when people are coming up to you going, "Here's a truckload of money. Play a helicopter pilot flying people away from an earthquake." Yeah, right. That's cool. But I mean, I'm surprised that someone as talented as him hasn't been tempted. Because surely people have come to him and said, Paul Thomas Anderson or someone's come to him and gone, not necessarily P.T. Anderson, but someone like that, gone, he is a, really offbeat, off-kilter kind of role that I think, you'd be really interesting in. and he's never really done it. I mean, again, I don't know that anybody's offered anything to him, but surely the opportunity as the biggest movie star in the world, you get to pick what you do next. And if you decide, actually, I'd like to do something a bit different and interesting this time, and you pick up a phone and say, you know who I really enjoy? I really enjoy Darren Aronofsky's films. No, I really enjoy Paul Thomas Anderson, or I really enjoy, I don't know, Quentin Tarantino. I don't know, somebody making interesting films, and go, hi, I really like what you did last time with Isle of Dogs or whatever it is. If you ever have a role for me, would you be interested in working together? I mean, those guys are auteurs, but you have Dwayne Johnson on the books. Your film's probably getting made, right?
Even I would love him just even before kind of taking on a full film, just having like a weird character cameo, just one of those pop in, pop out, comedic death or whatever, or dumb fuck stupid scenario, just to give a taste for him of like what it could be, and just a sample for everyone else.
I guess if he's not interested, he's not interested. He just wants to make action films, and sure, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, even if usually people do that when they get to the end of their career, and Bruce Willis does now. He just makes garbage because I guess he's got enough money and he just does whatever he wants to do. But it's just been disappointing that someone of that much talent. I'll be interested to see what he does with Black Adam, because maybe a superhero film is a slight sideways step outside of what he usually does.
I don't know, because he kind of ends up, every character that he ever plays ends up being superpowered in some way, not necessarily in the superhero style, but it's like, I mean, you think of the character that he is in the Fast and the Furious movies, and he's basically a superhero, just without the tidy whities on the outside of his pants, he's never, like, I would love to see him. I would love to see him in a Kevin Smith movie.
He was in a Kevin Smith movie. No, he wasn't. Was the Other Guys? Was that a Kevin Smith movie?
I don't think that was a Kevin Smith movie. The Other Guys.
Everyone getting it wrong, getting it mixed up with that Bruce Willis film he did.
Yeah.
I don't know. Once Upon a Time. Sorry, I'm very right. It's Adam McKay, not Kevin Smith.
That's right, yeah.
It's been a long time since Kev did something that was worth seeing.
But that's my point. I would just kind of like to see him just Kevin Smith, do a Kevin Smith parody version of The Rock in some way, shape, or form.
I'd love to see him in Clerks 3. You're not even supposed to be here today. That would be hilarious. Interestingly, Black Adam is being directed by Jaume Collet-Serra, who I've never heard of. But interestingly, his most recent work as a director was Jungle Cruise. So that doesn't bode well.
Like I say, it's not a bad movie. It's just guilty of trying too hard, much like me in the bedroom.
Snap! That's a self-burn. Those are rare.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want okay. It's a bit like Finch. Finch wasn't a bad film. It was just meh. And I want to go and see. I mean, I want DC to make better films. And for me, Shazam was maybe a smidge above. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah. And in fairness, it was only because everything else DC's had its name has been like ugh. So you get
come to Armchair Producers for the most accurate, easy to follow movie reviews.
The thing is that everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. You go, it's a little bit like earlier. You were talking about Edgar Wright. You look at Edgar Wright's films, and most of them are like, oh yeah, and he comes up with one, and he's coming up with one that's like, yeah, it's a step back from oh.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is our thing now. We don't give numbers for reviews. We give audibles.
We give sound. These are the grunts. It's just like it's like Home Improvement, but it's a podcast. But yeah, it's I would I would like Black Adam to be good because I thought Shazam was okay, but anyway, I'm with you. I think he could do more, and there is a lot of Dwayne Johnson coming out. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 films in development, including Big Trouble in Little China, apparently.
Stop it, Hollywood.
But,
Just
that one's been
stop it.
sitting around for a while, so fingers crossed that never happens.
Yeah. But my request to Dwayne Johnson is surprise me.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. Do something. Even Tom Cruise went out and did Magnolia back in and he did Eyes Wide Shut in the late 90s. Yeah. And
they
what was
were
that?
Len Grossman or something for Tropic Thunder.
That was in Tropic Thunder in the mid 2000s. These were all un-Tom Cruisey kind of roles. He was unrecognizable as Len Grossman, and in fact, I should have made that spin-off movie when they could, because they can't make it now. So I'd like to see The Rock turn up in something where you go, that was The Rock.
Put tons of prosthetics on him, let him disappear. Boom.
I'm with you on that one. Good call.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts, or should we wrap it up with our standard 2 hours?
Right on the 2-hour mark, so we will wrap it up for a sprightly hour 55 minutes of thereabouts.
But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for so much for joining us live, if you did, and for later on or on podcast services where all good podcast services are available. We have been talking about Cowboy Bebop, Wheel of Time, The Morning Show, Finch. We had our sponsors from 1970. Don't forget to redeem those codes, ladies and gentlemen. Last night in Soho, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. We're going to be going on to Vibes and had a little bit of a dig at Dwayne Johnson. We know you can do better. Go on, show us, surprise us. Bit of a packed show. I think we did quite well.
I did.
Yes.
We're catching up. We're catching up slowly with everything that's happened over the last couple of months.
Yeah. And hopefully very soon, depending on how things go, we will. I think we'll be able to have some early talks about Hawkeye.
That comes out tomorrow. I think
it's really, today.
I know. I did something this week I promised I would never do. I signed up for Disney Plus.
You fool.
But I did cancel one of my other streaming services before I did it, because I always said I'd never sign up for another one.
That's fair.
I've cancelled one and signed up for that. And it's a big banner on Disney Plus this afternoon that said, coming November 24. I'm like, it's November 24. And I clicked on it and they're like, nah. And so it must mean November 24.
It's now streaming.
Now available. Well, fuck you,
now
Disney.
Available.
That's what it means. It means November 24 in the US, because I guess they didn't want it pirated. But anyway, I'd be curious. We will have some early impressions on that one.
Yeah, and then no doubt we will have some other bits and pieces. Like there's I'm going to be actually going to watch Newsroom for the first time ever.
I will be interested in your take, because I loved it.
I am. My hopes are pretty high, so I'm going to try and temper them and just enjoy. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next week. Good night.